Hello, everybody, and welcome to Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
And today we have a very special guest with us. Say hello to the people, Bill.
Well, hello, people, but I want to know how the heck you came up with Two Guys and a Chainsaw.
This is Bill Oberst Jr., a very prolific star of the horror screen, and we're really, really happy you're here. Let's see, Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I think, what did we batted around questions, ideas, right, Craig?
Well, Todd sent me a list.
I guess for me that counts as batting ideas.
Yeah, and we narrowed it down, and Bill, it's funny, when Todd asked me to do this, I was a little bit skeptical. I didn't have any experience doing anything like this, and I thought that we would just sound like a couple of dorks talking about movies, which we do.
Yeah.
But so I just kind of went along with whatever he said, thinking that this would never go anywhere, and so we just kind of landed on that name, and here we are, 100 and almost 70 episodes later.
I think I really wanted to use the chainsaw sound effect for our intro. I think that's kind of what tipped the scale on that one.
I have not heard that intro. I'll have to. I like that. There's something about a chainsaw, isn't it?
There is, right? It's super scary. There are whole massacres. There are whole movies built around chainsaws, right?
That's right.
And we've watched
far too many movies. There are as many bad chainsaw movies as there are bad zombie. I get scripts because I'm in the genre, and 2 years ago there was a zombie western craze. Apparently someone had won an award with a zombie western screenplay, so they were coming in from all over the world. And in 1 week, I got 3 zombie western scripts, 2 of which included a zombie sheriff riding into town on a zombie horse.
I would love to see that movie.
Come on, guys. I hope they never got made.
No, none since then.
Jeez.
The craze has passed, huh?
Yeah.
How about now, Bill? Are you getting more? Well, by the way, for our listeners out there, the movie of Bill's almost 200 film credits that he has up on IMDb, you should go to his page. It's really, really
insane.
long. Yeah, the one we chose to review today was Abraham Lincoln versus Zombies, so that's why we're talking about zombies today. What is it about the zombie genre, Bill? What is it that are you seeing a slowdown, or is it just as popular as ever?
No, there's no slowdown. Something happened, and hell if I know, because I'm an older guy, and so in my generation there were monsters, and the idea was that the monster was something other. But really, it was us. And then you get the additional layer that we create the monsters by the way we react to their monsterdom. And this gets back to the idea of traveling carnivals, of exhibitions of human oddities, the Frankenstein monsters, the universal, I didn't ask to be born, Larry Talbot, the original Wolfman, the idea of some inner trait that you can't control, all these sort of things. It was more tied to humanity. But then at some point, long after, I was going to say the atomic age, but it was long after the atomic age, our taste in monsters changed. And I think when The Walking Dead hit, zombies became codified as the monster. And so if you talk to a kid today, the 14-year-old version of 14-year-old nerdy me, and you say monster, immediately they will think zombie.
Yeah.
So I think that there's some underlying cultural. I think it relates to a hopelessness, not just a fear of the apocalypse, but a certainty that we are headed towards an apocalyptic end, a lack of hope. That's what I think accounts for it.
That's interesting. There are a lot of people who talk about this and frame it. The similar thing about superhero movies, right? Why are we seeing so many big blockbuster superhero movies all across the world? And I've heard people argue a similar kind of thing, that people are a little hopeless right now, and they're so downtrodden, and what they want to see in their entertainment is somebody who can come in and fix it, because at this point we've decided we're unable to fix anything ourselves or come to any consensus about anything, and everybody's fantasy is just for somebody who's better than us and bigger than us, who is pure and good, to come in and sweep all the bad away and set things right. So you're talking about kind of like the parallel. One is a little more hopeful, one is a little more cynical. And
Sure. I mean, one version says that we are already the Walking Dead, all of us. because we can't really do anything but shuffle around and consume each other in spasms of hate. That's all we can do is eat each other up and then regurgitate the bile, which creates more hate and more walking zombies. That's us. That's our society. In the view of many people who are younger than me, who I interact with in the business, they are quite certain that humanity has no future, that we are definitely headed for either a robot apocalypse or a zombie apocalypse. And at 3 a.m, they have arguments about whether it will be robots or zombies. But definitely nothing good is going to happen.
Wow. So these are conversations you're actually having on set with the people in this industry right now?
Oh yeah, man, absolutely. This is the general mindset of the people who are now creating our entertainment. And I think that this is a built-in problem with our fascination with popular culture. For instance, the Oscars are essentially an inter-industry award. They're no different than the Plumbers Association or the National Engineers Association giving their awards.
Right.
But we lend them almost a spiritual, religious credence because movies, which are made just to make money, we take them in and make them, I think they fill a spiritual void in us. And so because of that, we're tied into spiritual culture in a way that we can't easily dismiss these images that are coming to us by groups of people who are creating our entertainment who are hopeless. And so it breeds more hopelessness in us because we're not able to take off the cultural glasses and say, this is something made by a human being just like me, and this is their point of view. And I don't have to accept it because there's the music and the glamour, and it's big, and it gets into us in a way that a book doesn't. We can look at a book and go, that's bullshit. But it's harder to do that with a movie, and we're willing participants in it. So yes, these are real conversations that I have all the time on set with people, and the wider culture has zero discernment when it comes to what we consume. If it's big and flashy, we eat it.
Is that one of the reasons that I've read, about this movie and some of your reasons for taking this movie, and you've done not only so many movies, but, such a wide variety. I was looking at your page and you've done voiceover stuff for kids movies and all kinds of stuff. So what brings you to a particular project? And I guess specifically this project, what was it that made you say, yeah, sure, I'll take this on?
They fired their original Lincoln.
No, that's not what I've read. What I've read is that you've actually played Lincoln multiple times on stage, that they sought you out because of that, and that you agreed to do it so long as you would get to deliver the Gettysburg Address. Is that just bullshit?
No, so I just added the additional truthful element, which usually doesn't get out there. So what happened was they had a Lincoln who was fantastic, and I thought was really great. Was very, very tall. I'm not very, very tall, and that's an essential part of a Lincoln. And so then I got contacted by the producers who knew that I had played Lincoln, and they said, well, what if we had you dub some of Lincoln, do some of the voice? So I did some of the voice. Oh, this is fantastic. So, maybe we'll have our Lincoln do our Lincoln, and then you'll dub the voice, which I thought immediately, well, this is going to be very cumbersome unless you have him off screen a lot. And so then, sure enough, I got a emergency call from one of the producers at the Asylum about 11 o'clock at night and said, can you get on a plane in the morning and come fly to Savannah and play Abraham Lincoln for 3 weeks? And I was like, I'm 5'9". Okay, in lifts, I'm 5'9". And he said, you'll stand on a box. And I said, I haven't even seen the script. He said, you can read it on a plane. We really want you to do this. So I said, okay, we'll call my manager and wake him up, and you guys talk. And so they did, and the next morning I was on a plane. So I got to set, and the director, Richard Shinkman, who was not happy about losing his very tall, wonderful Lincoln, for whatever reason, he looked at me. I said, oh, hello, pleasure to meet you. And he said, you're the new Lincoln? I said, yes. He said, God help us. God help us. Eventually, we formed a good working relationship, and I hope I gave him a performance he was happy with, but I did have to stand in a box. So, yes, I was very eager to do it because I knew that I would never again be allowed to play Lincoln on film because I'm not 6'4", but I thought I could bring the spirit of Lincoln to life, and if it had to be a zombie movie, so be it.
They hate you, Abraham. Why must you go to that awful place?
Because the Battle of Gettysburg was significant, and it must be recognized.
I don't see why.
There were 50,000 casualties. And the dedication of that mass grave's an event I must attend. I've been asked to speak.
What is there of use to say over the bodies of dead young men?
It's my belief that our victory there was a turning point in the war. I wish to deliver a message of unification and hope.
I want to say, that first of all, you didn't look short. You standing on that box, you looked very tall and commanding. So congrats there. And I really thought that your performance of Lincoln was great. Of course, we have seen him portrayed by many people, and many people have done a great job. But I thought that you really embodied the character. And when I read that, little bit of trivia that you really wanted to read the Gettysburg Address, I read it after I had watched the movie, but that part of the movie really stood out to me, and I thought, I get it. I get why they wanted this guy. This.
And
guy
it's really funny that you say that because the Gettysburg Address was only a couple lines in the original script, and Richard Shinkman is also a great lover of history. I said, what do you want? Do you want a parody? He said, no, I want the Lincoln on the penny, and we're going to do the Gettysburg Address, and they won't let us use it in the movie. But we're going to do it. We're going to shoot it anyway. Let's shoot the whole thing. And so we shot it, both of us thinking, okay, we just did something just for us, and it won't be in the movie. And then they used it.
That's great. I'm starstruck just talking to you about it because I'm so fascinated with the industry, and to be able to talk to somebody who has so much experience is really a delight for me. So thank you again for joining us. And
thank you. And nobody ever really wants to talk about the meat of this stuff, and so that's why I knew you guys would. And I'm really happy to talk to you. The ideas behind it. Not only everybody's only interested in what's it like on set.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, this kind of really dovetails into why you're here in the first place, Bill, because, we actually have met and formed a bit of a friendship over the last couple years, online mostly, but then in person for a couple days. Before we did this podcast, I would every October for a little while started challenging myself to watch a horror movie a day, and then I would challenge myself to write it up that evening and then post it on my personal blog online. And it was just something I was doing because I enjoy horror movies, and I don't get to watch them very often. It gave me a month for my wife to say, okay, Todd, you can watch another horror movie today. And then I could exercise my writing chops as well. And so I was visiting my dad, who actually isn't a very big fan of horror movies, but I was with my parents, and I had to watch, a horror movie that night. And I said, hey, Dad, you want to watch it with me? And he said, sure. And so we were flipping around, I think it was Netflix, looking for a movie to see, and Abraham Lincoln versus Zombies, for whatever reason, came up, and he said, I think I've heard of that. And I said, no, I think you probably heard of Abraham Lincoln versus Vampires. But we sat down and we watched it anyway, and we watched it and we thought, it's not a fantastic film, to be completely honest, but the thing that really kept us glued to the screen was watching you. And I'm really not blowing smoke there. I didn't know you at the time, but by the time it was over and we'd seen the Gettysburg Address and this whole thing unfold in front of us, we just kind of looked at each other and said, wow, the guy who played Lincoln really elevated that material. And that was the most fun that we had in this movie, was just watching Lincoln on screen and your portrayal of him.
And that's because of Abraham Lincoln, really not because of me. I tried to bring the spirit of Lincoln, and anytime you correctly interpret Abraham Lincoln, you're going to have something soulful and interesting. You can hardly go wrong.
Well, you even got the voice in there as well. I think for a long time, as at least I remember as a young kid, there would be portrayals of Lincoln, and he'd have this certain kind of commanding voice. And then later on, I learned that it was pretty well known that he didn't have that kind of voice. And so, again, I was impressed that you didn't go with that caricature voice of Lincoln to do this, but went more authentic.
We shot ours before the Spielberg came out. And when I saw the Spielberg and heard the voice that Daniel Day-Lewis did, I thought, okay, I can die now because I've done it. I made at least one choice that Daniel Day-Lewis made. We have at least one acting choice in common.
The voice of Lincoln.
Yeah, the voice. I always think if a character is already important, don't make his voice sound important. It's always better to counterpoint, come from underneath and make him sound as if he's almost fumbling for his words.
Well, it kind of demythologizes him a little bit, right? It kind of brings him down to earth and maybe a little more relatable for the audience.
And he was like that in life, because people would come in with something very important, and he would tell a story about a farmer and a plow and a dead dog and stare out the window for 5 minutes, and then he would say the thing that ends up in the history book. But he didn't just open his mouth and say the things that ended up in the history book. I think he was as authentically American as anyone in our history books. He really was the spirit of America with all of our warts. He was so ugly. He was so unattractive in every way. He wasn't a skilled public speaker, but he had this spirit of this country.
So it's a search and rescue mission that we're on, then, Mr. President?
Something like that. Truthfully, gentlemen, I hold out a little hope of recovering our lost troops, but I aim to learn exactly what fate befell them and to complete their mission, God willing, because their aim was a kosher one. Fort Pulaski must be captured.
To our fallen comrades!
When you're acting, are you tapping into, are you looking at a character and saying, what bits of this can I especially relate to, or what of myself can I bring to the character? Or do you try to remove yourself entirely from that?
Remove. And better actors than me, I'm not a great actor, but really good actors say, well, we use the as if. It's as if so-and-so was happening in my life, and I relate to that. I've never been able to do any of that. I just know that all humans feel the same thing. We're all capable of the same thing. Mother Teresa and Osama bin Laden are essentially the same. They just made different choices, but we all have the same faculties. So I figure, okay, if I fully understand the world, the intellectual, spiritual, physical world of this character, then there's no reason that I can't interpret that, because we have exactly the same faculties. So that's, for me, it's knowledge. The more I know about, I don't mean, where he was born, and sure, that's important, but I want to know, when we look at the world, we all see it in a very particular lens. What is his lens? And if you can understand the character's lens so well that you can look at a new thing they never saw, like zombies, and think, here's how they would have seen this threat, then you're getting close. And that's what I wanted to do.
Well, I thought that you did a really good job of making the character, very human and very relatable. But, the Lincoln that I think of, when I was a kid, my parents took me to Disneyland or World or one of those things, and you go to the Hall of Presidents, and you've got, the animatronic Lincoln up there. And despite the fact that you really gave him these human characters, I still got that iconic Lincoln from you. I think that was, for me, it was relatable, because that was kind of the image of him that I'd had. And maybe that had to do, you talked about his appearance and whatnot. Maybe that had to do with, the makeup and the design. Regardless, despite the fact that you did bring a personal character to him, you still captured that iconic nature. And
the iconic nature of Lincoln, his grandeur, comes from weakness. It's not, Ray Bradbury said this, it's not fullness that gives us strength. It's want, it's emptiness, it's yearning. That's what gives a person and a character strength. And I think that's what gives him that grandeur, is his inherent weaknesses.
And something else that I was interested in, Todd and I had been texting back and forth over the past couple of days talking about this movie, and we've both been so excited to do this. But, what Todd said a little bit earlier, and I wouldn't say this, that I didn't think it was a a great movie. I wouldn't say that because I feel like that's like, somebody invites you over for dinner and then you criticize the food. Like, I'm not going to do that. But the critics kind of expressed the same thing that Todd did. I was reading the critical reviews of the film, and they weren't particularly kind to the film, but pretty much everybody said that what elevated the film above some of the Asylum's other productions was your performance. Now, as an actor, I'm a community theater actor, so my experience is far different from yours, I'm sure. But as an actor, how does that make you feel when somebody says something? Well, it wasn't a great movie, but he was great in it. I mean, is that a compliment to you, or?
It's embarrassing and it makes you squirm. So you never mention it. You never share those sort of comments. And if you make a comment on the review page, which I always try to do if comments are allowed, you mention other people.
Yeah.
You say, thank you for reviewing, Todd Kuhn's movie, blah, blah, blah. And you make it implicitly clear in your comments that the movie's not about you.
And that's exactly what Bill did, actually. You must have a Google notice that pops up every time you're mentioned online someplace new.
I do.
And so that's the only way you have read my review. And I was shocked. I was really surprised when just a day or two later, Bill came on and wrote a comment there. And one thing I've learned about Bill over the last few years is he's a very humble person. He's not very likely to toot his own horn, but he did. He came on and he said, thank you so much. And he pointed out some of the funny things that I thought were funny about the movie. And he said, I'm glad you enjoyed those bits. I thought they were funny, too. He talked about the rest of the cast and how he had a good time. I actually wish that was still up. I was looking for it the other day, and I realized when I moved my site over, I moved my information over to a new version, and somehow that got lost. But through that comment, we had a bit of a back and forth, and we kind of left that where it was. But then later on, because I was working at the university at the time and good friends with a man named Randy, who was a professor at the school, who taught a class still teaches a class called Acting for the Camera. I said to Randy, I have this this nice little exchange with this really hardworking actor out in Hollywood. He seems like a pretty down-to-earth guy. He seems pretty nice, and we had a nice conversation. What if I reach out to him and see if he's willing to come back and talk with the kids about his experiences in Hollywood, his real experiences, like from one working actor to these kids, no holds barred kind of thing. And I reached out back to you, and you said, Todd, I'll do you one better. I'll fly out at my own expense, and I'll do this and maybe we can put together a kind of presentation that I've been wanting to try out for a while. About building your own personal brand. And sure enough, Bill came out to our small little Midwestern town and spoke to these students, gave them some amazing advice, did a wonderful presentation for our community there, shared a lot about his experiences in Hollywood, but I also felt did a fantastic job of inspiring others who are going out into the acting world, not just telling them it's going to be hard, which is what they hear a lot but don't necessarily believe, but also saying it's going to be hard, but here's how you deal with that, here's how you cope with it, and here's how you can use some things to your advantage like I did. And
yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank you publicly for that. That was a wonderful thing you did for our students, and I thought a lot of the advice that you had was really good. You have a very interesting story about how you really took off as an actor who'd been doing stage work for so long and suddenly broke into the movie industry very quickly. Over a short time, amassed a lot of credits.
Yeah, I enjoyed sharing that with them. I like challenges. I like nearly impossible things, and I love taking machines apart and figuring out how they work. And the business of entertainment, when I was really rocking and rolling in it, which was 2008 to 2018, was a particular kind of machine. And I enjoyed taking it apart and figuring out, okay, how do I do this? What are the components? It was fun.
Well, has it changed now?
Oh, yeah. The more digital there is, the less money there is to be made.
Yeah.
And so that's why, the movies that I make and that everybody I know in Hollywood makes, people, family members and people who grew up in the era of theaters will say, hey, when am I going to see you in a movie on a theater? Never.
No, that's not true, though. You just worked with Rob Zombie, didn't you?
Yeah, okay. You do an occasional one. Yeah, it's fun. But for the most part, the answer is no, because the industry has in one sense gone underground. 99% of movies now, and that's actual statistic, are watched on devices. They're not watched in theaters anymore. And so movies are out there and they're making money, but there's such a proliferation of them. Everybody can make a movie now, and so everybody does make a movie, you know? And so that's why there's plenty of work, but that's why I decided, all right, you know, I did my 10 years of rock and rolling with movies, and now I want to diversify back to stage, do my movies to make my money, and do my stage for my heart. And so that's what I'm doing now.
How you feel about that? You know, do you think that it's just, you know, kind of a natural progression of things? Is it a good or a bad thing? You know, Todd and I review all kinds of movies. We do some movies that have been really successful, you know, theatrically, but really we tend to lean more towards more obscure things. And we've done movies that have been more independent and made by lesser known people in the field. And so from your perspective, do you think that it's good for the industry that more people are getting this platform? Maybe even people with less experience? Or do you think that it is in some way bringing the industry to a lower level of excellence? I don't know if I'm phrasing that correctly.
It's great for humanity and bad for business. So it's which means that it's probably balance a really good thing. And what it's done is the same thing that's happened in all areas. You know, there's no middle class anymore, and it's the same in Hollywood. You either work in low budget pictures or you work in the super blockbusters, which are the only ones that are ever going to movies anymore. And there's nothing in between. So it's done the same thing that has happened to all industries. But for humanity, it's a great thing that a guy in Mumbai can write about his lived experience and show it to the world. It's a wonderful thing.
It is, although, you know, I'm thinking about what you said earlier about how you said that we're consuming pop culture, we're taking it more seriously than we used to. These films that are really made, first and foremost, to make money, and we're trying to read a lot of artistic merit or a lot of deep thematic material into it when maybe that's not a good thing. And I also wonder, you know, if another consequence of this is we used to have a sort of shared experience as humans, or at least, I mean, not across the world necessarily, but in our pockets of culture, like maybe, say, nations. You know, we all kind of watch the same one or two TV programs, one or two network television programs. We're kind of watching the same news, reading more or less the same newspapers. And now that it's possible for anybody and everybody, you know, in journalism, for example, to start their own little online news source, for us to be able to put out a little podcast like this for people to listen to, and then for all these movies to be made, and then a platform like Netflix comes along, and, you know, who knows how many movies there are in Netflix, but I know that it's curating a bunch for me, and it's throwing at me the ones it thinks I'm going to like. I mean, in some ways, is it bad because it's dividing us a little bit more by removing that shared experience?
Yes, homogeny gone, and homogeny was what created Hollywood. There is no Hollywood. It was always just an idea. I mean, I lived there for 10 years, full time, and every day I'd go out and see the Hollywood sign, and I would go, this doesn't exist. This is a monument to an idea. But the idea is possible because we had a shared experience. Things like going to the moon, which are from my culture, you know, everybody was watching that. And it was possible then to have great thematic experiences as humans, and it's not now. I think also that the celebritization of our culture, the emphasis on celebrities, to the point that now it's not even just who is a bigger celebrity within the celebrity world, but we all want to be celebrities. Everybody wants to be a celebrity. So there's even some jealousy of celebrities, you know. Well, what the hell do they know? So what? They won an Oscar. I did a YouTube video. And yeah, so because of that, there's less of a trust and a willingness to join in a joined experience. I do mourn the loss of that. The whole idea of cinematic exhibition was that you would, with a group of strangers in the dark, experience something larger than life, and now everything about that is the opposite. Now, in isolation and not in the dark, you experience on the go wherever you are, and you experience something that's small enough to fit in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you feel about that notion of celebrity? I mean, I've met, I suppose, a couple of celebrities in my life, but this is certainly the most expansive conversation that I've had with somebody who, with 200 credits on your IMDb page, that I would consider a celebrity. And you've worked with, Rob Zombie, you've worked with Jamie Lee Curtis, some of the biggest names in horror and in celebrity culture in general. Like, do you feel like a celebrity, and how does that whole culture, how do you feel about that?
Well, what are you celebrated for? That's what makes you can feel celebrated. And if you're celebrated for something that you have legitimately worked your ass off and you've done what you think is good, laudable work, then it's fine to be celebrated. But a celebrity, that's just a silly concept. It's like the question, are you famous? I used to tour schools all the time when I did stage work. And I was a working stage actor for 14 years. I made my full-time living doing it. And the first thing kids would ask, always, the very first thing, I'd be there to play Mark Twain or something, are you famous? And if the answer is no, it shuts down everything. So, yeah, you meet people like Jamie Lee Curtis, Rob Zombie, and I don't think anybody feels like a celebrity. They are aware that their work is celebrated. I'll give you an example of what it's like at the upper echelons. I worked with Hugh Jackman, and we had a scene where I was his boss, and we had a phone conversation. We had a conversation in the office, face to face. Like, he's standing over me at the desk telling me I'm not going to do, I want him to cheat or something. And I'm not going to do this. So anyway, they shoot the master, which is both of us. Then they shoot his coverage over my shoulder. And then they say, well, now we're going to do the over on Bill, so Mr. Jackman, you can go back to your trailer. Because you're not in this shot. We're shooting it clean on Bill. And Hugh Jackman says, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to feed lines to Bill. I'll sit in the corner. And I said, you don't really have to do that. And he said, if it was me, would you do it for me? And I said, yes. He said, we're in the same business. Let's do the scene. And I find the same thing with all of the, quote, celebrities that I've worked for, Jamie Lee Curtis, Rob Zombie. They're working people and they understand why they're celebrated. So that kind of celebrity, great. But it's a difference between being celebrated deservedly and just being a celebrity.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense. And I read that Jamie Lee Curtis was a big fan of you. She directed you in an episode of Ryan Murphy's Scream Queens. Is that right?
Yes, and I made her laugh so hard that we ruined a take, and I was really, really happy about it. But I made her laugh because I did exactly what she said to do.
Well,
great.
Hearing stories like that, it makes me happy, because it makes me happy to know it confirms what I want to believe, which is that these people are just people. We do celebrate them and we elevate them to such a high status and look up to them in so many ways. It's nice to hear that they're just folks. Just like
you should never look up to them. I think that's our mistake. You can celebrate them. Babe Ruth, a great baseball player. Celebrate him for being a great baseball player, and thank God he didn't live in this era. We would think, well, he's a god, and everything he does must be right, and I must look up to him. Why would you look up to Jamie Lee Curtis or me or anyone in the business? Why would you do that? Celebrate them for the activity they do that you admire.
I think it's just because I have so much respect for your craft and your talent. Again, like I've said, I studied theater a little bit in college, and I've continued to do it. I'm turning 40 this year. I live in a very small town. We have a very small community theater. I continue to act, and I like to do it. And so to see these other people who are so talented at what they do, I so respect that talent and what they do. That's why I look up to people like you. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you personally, but it's just your craft and your skill that I really admire and respect, and that I do look up to.
Boom. And that's it. Yes, and I do the same thing for writers and creators and people in fields that I'm interested in, and I do exactly the same thing. I would just never assume that all of their personal traits are laudable. That's never a good.
This is a very timely conversation, and because this is a question I've struggled with a lot too. Is it possible to celebrate a person for what they do and still know that there are other things they do that aren't so great. I think as a culture, we're struggling with that right now with the Me Too movement. You know, we've always known there's this insidious side of Hollywood that most people would like to pretend isn't there, and that's super convenient for those who aren't affected by it. But for those who are affected by it, you know, it can leave lasting scars. And that's what is being forcibly, finally, you know, pushed up to the forefront. And we're learning that these people, I mean, I hate to name names, but I'll just give one example. You know, Kevin Spacey is a guy that I would just go and see a movie just because he was in it, because I loved watching him work. And now, you know, there are these allegations against him. We still don't know if they're true or not, but he's being, you know, tested in this regard as to his character. And there's a lot of pressure and a lot of push, like, well, don't watch his movies now. You can't enjoy them anymore knowing who he is as a person. And I struggle with that because I get that. I understand that feeling. And, you know, it's kind of rooted in the business world. Like, why would you spend your money to support something that you don't agree with? Because, you know, behind that actor is still a person who's indirectly, but, you know, very real, getting money from you by supporting their work. But on the other hand, you know, like you said, it's like nobody's perfect. And people who are bad people all throughout history, we know were terrible people, made really beautiful and really wonderful works of art. And that's something that we all have to struggle with. You know, where do you fall on that? You know, how do you feel? I'm having a hard time reconciling.
Not to put you on the spot.
Not to force you to pin this down yourself. But do you have any thoughts on this?
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone is the first thought that always comes to my mind. And then, two, everybody has their own lines. You have to decide. You know, if it's a German filmmaker who supported Nazism, then no, I can't really enjoy the movie. But, you know, then everybody has their own lines where you have to decide. And so, yes, consumer culture, people can decide. But I don't think anybody has the right to say to somebody else, you can no longer enjoy this person's creation because we know an unsavory thing about them. You know, I spent much of my theatrical career recreating historical characters. And one of them was JFK, who I did for 5 years up in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts for the Kennedy Museum. And Kennedy's personal, intimate history is full of very bad choices, shameful choices. And at the same time, his oratory and his actions inspired millions. And so, yeah, I've thought about this for years and years. How do you divorce the two? And I've decided you either have to be able to look in the mirror and say, this is what a human being is, and I'm looking at all of me, and then apply that same standard to others, or you just become sanctimonious and say, they did a bad thing, and I could never do that bad thing. I think there's some empathy involved.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's maybe one of the best explanations that I've heard in having this discussion. It brings me to something else that I wanted to ask you about, because I learned this first from Todd, but then also in reading about you, I've learned that you are somebody who is very much guided by your faith and your religious beliefs. And I was wondering if that has any impact on your choices that you make about roles that you will take or things that you will do on screen or things that directors ask of you. How do you marry your faith with your profession?
Well, Jesus is at the center of my life, and I mean Jesus of Nazareth, the historical teacher, the teachings, who he is, the whole metaphor of his life, everything that's at the center of my soul, and so it's always there. Early on stage, I didn't play a lot of evil people, but on film, my face has a rough texture, and so I was equated with malevolence. And early on, I had these inner spiritual conversations with what I view as the Creator, Father God, and said, you know, I'm being asked to play evil a lot. What do I do? And what I arrived at was, if I'm going to play evil, I'm going to damn well play evil. I want to make your skin squirm, and I want to make you think, oh, this isn't a joke. There's something really bad in the world. there's some rot at the core of the apple of humanity. So I've embraced it because of that. I'm never asked to play, or rarely asked to play, anyone who's essentially good, and that's okay because none of us are essentially good.
Mm-hmm.
But there are only two things that I won't do on screen. Lord knows I'll do just about anything and have done. But there are only two things that I won't do, and one is I don't say GD. I only said it once because so many people find it so offensive. It's like a slap in the face.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say fuck, but I get bored with it. It's so tiresome. It's just such an overused word. But yeah, okay. I'll bargain with you to take as many fucks out as possible. Leave me just one or two for emphasis.
Sure.
But okay, so I won't say GD. And then the other thing, I won't play a corrupt minister. Mm-hmm. And I've turned down 3 scripts because of that. People who say, I have faith and I am in touch with the creative force of the universe, and then do really, really evil things. I know those people exist, but I don't want to add fuel to that particular fire. So those are my only other 2 limitations. Other than that, if it's evil, sure, I'll play evil in whatever form, using my body, my mind, my soul, whatever. That's my job.
Right. Well, I that was a great answer, and I just want to say that I have a huge amount of respect for that. I consider myself a person of faith too. As an actor, you are pretending to be someone else. It's separate from who you are, and right. I don't know if everybody understands that, but I do, and I respect that you do have your boundaries. I think that's amazing. That's great.
They're pretty limited boundaries. So,
but boundaries nonetheless. And I would, I don't know. I've never been put in a position where I've had to make those choices. I've never been asked to do that. But I see things in film sometimes that, I love horror films. This is what Todd and I do week to week for the last 3 years. We talk about horror films, and I can watch people getting hacked up with chainsaws. Doesn't bother me at all. But you put a dog in violent situation, it really bothers me. I'm really bothered by sexual violence. It really bothers me, and I don't know what choices I would make if I were asked to be put in those positions. I don't think that I could, and not just as a person of faith, but just as a person, I don't know that I could put myself in those shoes, and maybe I wouldn't want to, because you are pretending, but in a way, you are also really trying to embody that truth. And I don't know if I would be comfortable doing that in some scenarios.
You're absolutely right. And it stays with you every single role that you do. Now that sounds pretentious. I try not to sound actor pretentious, but that is the truth. It stays with you, and it's like a very thin layer that you can't ever really scrub off, that you've been to this world. And the world's built up, and they accrue over time. That's very true.
You're a professional. This is what you do for a living. You have honed your craft, and I'm sure that you have a very strong sense of who you are as a professional, and you make those decisions accordingly. So I just have a lot of respect for that.
Thank you.
Can I ask along those lines, Bill? I've seen stuff that I kind of wish I hadn't seen, and I'm like Craig. I can watch pretty much anything on screen that's fiction, but especially like here in the era of YouTube, we get to see a lot of stuff that wasn't previously available to us. That's actual real life. Have you ever played a role that has stuck with you so long that you kind of regretted playing it, or maybe you wished you hadn't?
Yeah, there were 2. One was a movie called Children of Sorrow, where I played a cult leader. The other was Circus of the Dead, where I played a necrophiliac whose day job was as a circus clown, which sounds humorous, but it was not humorous. And in both cases, they were liars within liars within liars within liars, so that there was no truth in them. So that even when they said, now I'm going to tell you the truth, even that wasn't the truth. It was an unending, infinite nest of lies. And that is very sticky. That sticks in your mind, particularly when your job is essentially to lie. You know, I mean, you're coming from a truthful place, but you are pretending that you're something that you're not.
Right.
And to play a person who really doesn't have a core, who just lies, and if that lie doesn't work, they'll tell another lie. That sticks with you, and both of those movies gave me nightmares. And I know people would say, "Oh, you got a nightmare from being a movie," but you have to live in this, and if you're going to do it real, no matter the budget level, you have to give them the real inner experience of that person, or the camera can tell you're lying.
You could, or you could just phone it in, but you're not that kind of guy.
Well, I can't phone it in because I'm not an A-list actor, and I don't get hired to phone it in. When people call me and say, "We want you to do a role," almost always it's followed up by saying, "I saw you in blah, blah, and you were so intense." And I know that's what they want. I'm not allowed to phone it in. I'm not famous enough to phone it in.
Along those same lines, my freshman year in college, I was cast in a play where I was cast in a role that I could relate to on a personal level, but he was a bad guy. And I felt like I learned something about myself by playing that role. Have there ever been any roles that have been revelatory to you that you learned something about yourself from?
Yes, a role I did for Criminal Minds, in which I played a deformed serial killer, and he was physically deformed because he was a product of incest. My mother was Adrienne Barbeau, and my father was Tobin Bell from the Saw movie.
Wow.
Years ago, when they were teenagers, and I kidnapped Adrienne Barbeau, and we have this. She's amazing, by the way. When you put barbed wire around Adrienne Barbeau's neck, and it's fake barbed wire, but it can really hurt you. The points are sticky. Sure. When you put that barbed wire around her neck, and you say, "Is that okay?" She says, "Make it tighter. Let me feel it." I'm like, damn. This woman is amazing. But the reason that for that movie I felt very vulnerable because I had my shirt off with my weird torso showing, and they gave me deformed hands, and I had a big ugly ear, and I was as physically unattractive as I've ever been in a film, and playing this guy whose monstrosity, it was the classic wounded monster. And the reason that it touched me personally was because as a kid, I was fat, I had bad acne, I was a sissy, I was weird in every way that a boy in South Carolina could be weird. And I was in many ways a monster and was treated like a monster. I don't mean that in a self-pitying way. I just mean that, in the world of kids are cruel.
Yeah.
And playing this monster reconnected me with that and stripped away a little bit of the ego that working in LA had given me to say, you're still this thing, you're still this monster, you're still this oddity. And that was soft and touching to reconnect with.
I was really disappointed to see that. One of the first things I thought of when I saw that Criminal Minds is wrapping up is I was really hoping to see a revival of your character on a later episode.
They didn't know what to do with it. Matthew Gray Gubler wrote it, one of the cast members who played Dr. Reed for years. And Breen Fraser, the main producer, he wrote the script. And so that character was very close to their heart. But when the show aired, they got some feedback. Some people loved it, and other people said, "This is really, really dark. This character is too dark for Criminal Minds," because Matthew's a horror fan, which is why he hired me to do it. So I think they just never knew what to do with it.
Well, there's a lot of dark stuff on TV right now. Coming back to the zombie thing, you were talking about The Walking Dead. That show and zombies in general, like you said, there are some people who would say, and probably rightly so, that the zombie genre didn't really die or go. There was always some people who were interested in it, more or less starting with George Romero's films and going up there. But there's no denying it's much more popular over a wider swath of audience right now. It's not like happy stuff. You alluded to maybe why, but why do you think that zombie movies in particular and all this darkness right now is so popular with such a widespread audience on television?
I think we don't believe anymore. I'm getting ready to play Ray Bradbury on stage. I got the right from his family to play him. And so Bradbury said this at the end of Fahrenheit 451. One of the characters says, everyone must touch something so that when they die, their soul has a place to live. And it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you love something and touch it, and you leave it more like you when you die, then your soul has a place to go. And a lot of it will be wrong, but just enough of it will be right. And when people look at it, you're there. And that's what Ray thought about his books. But I think that somehow, as a larger culture, we've lost the belief that whatever it is, it doesn't matter really what it is that you believe in, but believe that you can personally touch something and make it better than it was. That's a pretty core belief for humanity, and I think the popular culture reflects it.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. I'm so glad that you're getting the opportunity to play Ray Bradbury, because I know that you are a huge fan. As are we. Both of us have read, Bradbury, and we have talked about the film adaptation of Something Wicked This Way Comes on our podcast. So I'm really glad that you have that opportunity. Are there any other dream roles that you would love to play before you retire, or?
Only one, and that's Eric, Phantom of the Opera, because in the book, he was born that way.
Uh-huh.
Nobody threw acid in his face. He wasn't burned in a fire. He was born that way, and he was actually exhibited as a human oddity in a circus for a while, and then he was purchased as a freak and traveled around what was then known as the Orient, and that's where he learned these sort of magical skills. And only the Chaney silent version kept that backstory for Eric, and even the original version, which is completely lost, had scenes showing him, his origin, and the audiences couldn't stand it, so they took it out. So there are hints of that in the Chaney version, but every other version says we have to find an excuse why this guy is so ugly. Or in Andrew Lloyd Webber, well, he's ugly, but he's also really kind of hot and romantic.
Right.
We seem to have trouble dealing with the fact that we turn our eyes away from things we consider not like us. And the more freakish and not like us, the more we want to turn away. You see a person who has only, one limb. They're missing their arms and one leg. Instinctively, we turn away because it's so unlike us.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I like to explore that type of role. If I had one on my bucket list, it would be that or something like it.
Oh, wow. It is such a coincidence that you bring that up, because I'm in the middle of that book right now. And my wife read it, and she passed it to me. She said, Todd, you've got to read this. It's so different from, and it's true. You're right. The book really deserves a real adaptation, I think.
I think so, too. But we don't deal well with that. We don't do well with it. There was the one moment in the 31 Frankenstein when the monster reaches up to the light, and this look on his face, this rapturous look on his face, and then they shut off the light. Mm-hmm. And that captured sort of the same feeling.
Well, I hope you get the opportunity, and maybe one of our many listeners,
both of them.
Yeah, both of them can pass you on to some great director. That'd be fantastic. But I just want to say, we're nearing the 1 hour mark, which is where we usually pass off. And this has been, in 170 episodes or whatever, one of my favorite episodes to record. It's been very different in format from our other episodes, but it's just been really, really cool to kind of get some insight into not just the industry, but into some personal insight into somebody who has really been immersed in it. And I can't thank you enough for agreeing to do this. It means so much to me talking to somebody who has worked with some of the people that I admire most in the world, somebody who I admire just based on the huge nature of your career. So I just want to express my extreme gratitude. Thank you so much.
I thank you. It's been one of the best conversations I've had in a while. These kind of conversations are like fertilizer to me. I need them. And so thank you for this opportunity.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome.
Thank you so much,
All
Bill,
right.
for joining us. And, Abraham Lincoln versus zombies, go out and see it.
Yeah, it's about Abraham Lincoln, and he fights zombies.
He does. They sleep, and he sneaks by them while they sleep. He has this really badass scythe that switches out. And he chops off so many heads.
Remember, Teddy? A man divided against himself cannot stand.
Yes, Mr. President.
Emancipate this!
Oh man, dude, I love that shot of you. The shot of you set against the sky with your scythe. Like, if I were you, I would totally have that still framed in my house. I hope you
And if you'll notice, I'll say this is my parting thing. When you look at that shot, the scythe is broken because they only had 3, and I broke every one by flinging, because they weren't meant to be flung open so violently. But every time I just got into it and go, and they go like, Bill broke another one. But it worked.
Great. Oh, it looks fantastic. You did a great job.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed this one, please share it with a friend. You can find us online on iTunes. You can find us on Google Play, anywhere your favorite podcasts are. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Two Guys and a Chainsaw, or you can go directly to our website where you can stream our episodes. Leave us a comment there as well, twoguys.red40net.com. We'll be continuing with another episode next week. Until then, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.